innocent people going to jail? Do you wish that there were people in the courtroom who could actually understand what's going on with the people's minds? You could help those that are so distressed and even be by their side in the moments of defense. What if you were to take the law and psychology and combine them? That way, you're able to bring justice in a psychological, accurate, scientific way. The forensic psychologist applies psychological principle to legal issues. If you're looking to become a psychologist or be involved in the law, obviously a master's degree in psychology as an undergrad is significant and will get you a head start on your psychology career. However, coming out with a major in psychology from undergrad will not provide you a natural career.
How do you become a forensic psychologist? Well, first of all, become a licensed psychologist.
So then when you go to graduate school, you need a minimum of a doctoral degree, which would be a PhD or a PsyD. Big misconception of forensic psychology. People think they can take online courses 2 to 4 years, give you a degree in forensic psychology, yet you cannot find a job off that because you need PhD, clinical psychology, and then into the forensic.
There are programs out there that says, come to our school and you can become a forensic psychologist. At least one email a month that says, I got my master's degree in forensic psychology from blank institute, and I can't get a job. The key is to become a licensed psychologist.
We need a bachelor's degree or master's degree. You would also need a doctoral degree following that. There, you would also need required supervised training under the PPP, Professional Practice of Psychology. After that, you can receive your state licensure. Each state has its own separate requirements for licensure, so if you are applying to be a clinical psychologist and need a licensure, to then receive that licensure, you need to follow the specific guidelines of that state. A starting salary for a forensic psychologist would be $60,000 to $70,000 a year, but for experienced forensic psychologists, it would be between $90,000 to $125,000 per year. If you're an expert witness in court, that can be $200 to $500 per hour. Maybe you wake up, you go to the office, but you're being called to court systems, law enforcement agencies, prisons and jails.
And I did their capacity parent evaluation. And then the next person I see is claiming that they're disabled and they can't work, so it's a disability eval. And in the afternoon, I run off to the Kent County Jail, and I see a guy there, and he's been charged, and his attorney wants a criminal responsibility and competency evaluation. And I'll spend the afternoon there. And then the next day, I'm doing court at 8:30, and I go testify in a termination of parental rights case. Okay, so here are 10 important things that forensic psychologists do within the law and within their job.
So one thing that forensic scientists do, they analyze the competency.
Which is actually a legal requirement to understand if their client is fit to stand for trial.
Psychologists need to realize if this client is even able to, especially after coming from a vulnerable situation, whatever that traumatic experience may have been. Forensic psychologists also deal with criminal profile. They analyze criminal behavior, watch patterns, so that they can help analyze and track down criminals based on psychological characteristics and behaviors. They also do assessment for insanity defense to see if their defendant will plead for insanity. This means that that defendant or criminal or client is now not responsible for anything that happened if they plead insanity, because that means that they're incapable to control their actions. They also do a risk assessment. They have to analyze if this person is likely to commit a crime again, if this person is posing as a danger to others, if this is a one-time thing. This does an analysis on past behavior, mental health, and factors that determine risk. They also take a big deal in analyzing the eyewitness's testimony. Obviously, when an eyewitness goes up to the stand, they take an oath to say the truth and nothing but the truth. Yet, often eyewitnesses' memory can be affected by the trauma or whatever's just going on. Their vision or perspective may be skewed, especially based on emotion being thrown into it. So forensic psychologists need to analyze the time and the stress of the situation and the leading questions and analyze the witness's actual behaviors to see if it's giving an accurate representation of the situation. When analyzing if confessions are false or not, in the law, there's a stigma for false confessions and for someone to step up and give a false confession. Yes, this may save someone else, but as a forensic psychologist, you want to make sure you get the right person and it's accurate. For false confessions, forensic psychologists analyze coercion, mental impairment, and misunderstandings. Forensic psychologists, if you choose to, also work with juvenile offenders. The psychological weight of the punishment, how much a kid can take versus an adult. They also spend a great deal on researching the sentencing and mitigation. That's ultimately the jury and the judge decides the sentencing and the mitigation. Yet, forensic psychologists understanding the proper mitigation and sentencing for that specific person, since psychology is pertained to the individual. This can be based off more mental illness, trauma, or developmental issues. There's also something in forensic psychology called victimology. This is definitely important, especially when dealing with crime, because there are a lot of psychological effects and trauma that can be taken on a victim of a crime scene. Psychologists really need to be careful with how victims are recovering, how their testimony might vary, understanding the reliability of that, and also being patient with it. Also, forensic psychologists need to be very aware of cognitive biases. This can be racial prejudices, confirmation biases, or overconfidence. The purpose for court is justice, so it goes beyond the sentencing and the legality. It's the justice and it's the psychological accurateness. Forensic scientists are everywhere, and often your day going into it, you don't know what it's going to look like because you're being pulled left and right. So why is it so important that we get accurate justice in these legal systems? Cases such as the Menendez brothers have been unsolved for years based off the debate on what the trauma these boys went through to then inflict the crime.
Was there anything in your past that you were aware of, consciously aware of, that was as frightening as what was happening that Sunday on the stairs?
And psychologists able to build a personal and real connection to properly defend Eric Menendez in court.
Maybe when Dad put the knife to my throat, but that's would be the only time.
Forensic psychologist has the ability to see the criminal, understand their vulnerabilities. That is what is most significant. Seeing that person as a real person and understanding where they come from. Getting a psychological evaluation. Also need proper training on how to get these people to confess, get these people to say things that they wouldn't usually say. In our developmental unit in psychology, we focus a lot on the childhood development and how that allures into your adulthood. The court illustrates a lot of social biases as well as conformity. Analyzing biases is really important, and we know from psychology that a bias can really affect the standings of a case and an experiment. Forensic psychology is definitely different from regular psychology because it's not typical experiments. It's more spent with actual relations of people, court cases, finding justice. But it's just as important as regular psychology. It's about the human mind. That is why you should consider being a forensic psychologist or becoming any psychologist to help people in need and understand the human mind. We're all humans. We deserve to be heard and understood and get accurate justice, as I've been saying throughout this whole video. Happy final. I hope everyone does well.